is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gravity Falls, Season 1, Episodes 2 and 3, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, and Headhunters. In these episodes, Dipper and Mabel are way more interested in searching for hidden monsters than they are in hanging out with their weirdo uncle, and honestly, I'm not really that mad at them about it. And then Mabel sculpts this amazing wax figure of her Grunkle, and somebody cuts its head off. It's aggressive. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many, many thanks to Melanie, who is in the chat. Hi, Melanie, for commissioning this episode. Erica is also here. This show, Owen is really mad at you, Melanie, for commissioning this because he wants to binge it and now he can't. So that's on you. But yeah, it's one of those shows that there's a friend of his that recommends TV shows to us a lot. And frequently, he'll do it during a time when we're not actually able to pick up something new because we're in the middle of one other thing. And he has mentioned Gravity Falls a couple of times. And he was a little bit irritated that we only started watching this because of the commission and not because he asked us to. But I was like, listen, me not watching it already means that I can get paid to watch it. So I really can't support this. So yeah, these episodes, this show is really special in the way that it comes at you so fast with jokes. Owen has compared it a couple of times to The Simpsons because of how you can miss a joke because you're laughing at the previous joke, and they just happen one on top of the other, and there's barely any lag. There are a few shows that do that, and there is something about that to me is so difficult to do well and not feel like you're just trying to rush things or like you're trying to almost go with critical mass instead of quality of joke. But they do it so well in the show. It's a combination of the timing and the exact delivery that a character will give something that I feel like if it was done with any slightly changed inflection, it just wouldn't land, you know? And that is part of what comedy is really about. People say that all the time, that comedy is about timing. 100%, but also comedy is about surprising you. And there are lines that it's not like I don't see the joke coming. It's that the way they chose to do the joke is so much more off the wall than what I thought, or is just said in a slightly different way. And I just find myself cracking up, even though I kind of saw it coming, but it's still really funny because it caught me off guard in its way. So yeah, I'm just, as somebody who tries to, entertain for a living, somebody who is interested in being funny, and I, as a child, was really interested in watching comedies, there would be stand-up comedies or even shows like Seinfeld. As a kid, I would watch these shows and really notice, he said that this way, and if he said it that way, that wouldn't have been funny. And I'm still fascinated by that and the reasons why it's funnier this way than that way. Because you can know for sure, oh yeah, that's funnier. But why is it though? And that's what I find so interesting. And I also think it's really fascinating when different people have totally different reactions to the same joke as well. So this show is kind of making me pay attention to that because it being animated, it's relying a lot more heavily on the actual written joke versus something that is like, you know, a sitcom where you have the look, the expression on somebody's face, the look of the scene overall, and how things are positioned. It's not that those don't matter in an animated series, but you can make it be whatever you want because you're, you know, like, so it is, I think, just so much more important if you're going to go by how funny something is, to just go by the writing and the voice delivery, the voice acting. And I'm just really impressed overall with the way that this show has just, it's so, it's ambitious for a show that's sort of, you know, meant to be family friendly, to pump out jokes like this one after the other and manage to do that while not actually getting into easy jokes that are more adult at times, you know, that's really not easy. So anyway, I'm getting into The Legend of the Gobblewonker now, season 1, episode 2. And, we have this, it opens up with a contest between, Dipper and Mabel about who's going to get the maple syrup to pour into their mouth first. Guys, this is 100% a thing I would have done if I had brothers and sisters. Maple syrup's the best thing ever. Maple syrup candy is one of my favorite things in the entire world. And Dipper is looking at a, it's like called Wacky News. I'm tempted to call it a comic book, but it's not. It's just like one of those like tabloid rags, really. And he's showing her, and this comes into play later, which is what I love about this show, that this winds up being important. He's trying to show her a page for a monster photo contest, but what she notices is a human-size hamster ball that is being advertised on the facing page, which turns into a fucking recurring gag that I low-key hope comes back yet again in later episodes. We shall see. But this is what I mean about like doing jokes really well. Calling things back is 100% effective. Like, even if it's a callback that's not like a calling back to something that didn't really work the first time, if you do a callback of it, it works better in the callback than it did originally half the time, you know? So what he wants to do is take photos of some monster that they encounter. He was hoping that they have a photo of the gnomes, but they do not. She just has beard hair for some reason. And they want to win this prize money. So when their uncle takes them out for family day to his sad little rowboat to go fishing, they have already got like a plan in mind for what they wanted to do, and they are not really interested in this. We're cutting off work and having one of those, you know, bonding type deals. And this is when Dipper says, is this going to be like the last bonding day? And we see them making counterfeit bills, which, beautiful, siren wailing. It was, the county jail was so cold, guys. So he says, all right, look, I understand that maybe I haven't been as amazing at this as I can be, but I am going to really try my best to do better. And we're going to have some real family fun. Now, who wants to put on some blindfolds and get into my car? I don't really know why he says that, because as we find out, they're just going to the, like, lake. So I don't know why he thought he needed to blindfold them in the first place. But it's a good little gag for a moment there. And they get there, and there is this dude. Now, guys, this weird old man, in the next episode, he calls himself, quote, local Kook, which, correct. I'm going to be hard pressed to talk about this dude without word for word simply repeating the shit that he says in this episode. Because I swear to God, it gets progressively more and more bananas. And this is also the first time that we see a few of these characters that wind up turning up again later. As far as I remember, we may have spotted them in other episodes, but I feel like, you know, we have this old woman who's like just trying to get the fish to jump into her frying pan. We have the lumberjack and his like lumberjack family that winds up being suspected of the quote murder of the wax figure later on. There's just a lot of people turning up here that I suspect are going to be regulars. And the lumberjack literally reaches into the lake, grabs a fish, pulls it into the boat, and then begins to punch it to death. Which I'm just like, yeah, that feels right. And so Dipper is starting to get a little weirded out at the idea that Grunkle Stan wants to just spend time with them for like the sake of spending time with them. He's just kind of like, you have not wanted to just do stuff with us the way that normal families do stuff with each other ever. So what's going on? And Grunkle Stan confesses that he wants to go, he likes fishing, and that he doesn't have any like friends really to go with him, because they don't quote like or trust me. And so they're both like kind of wondering if there's some sort of ulterior motive, but it really just comes down to he's a little bit lonely, and they're sort of obligated to spend time with him because he's their guardian at the moment. And he pulls out these two fishing hats that he has sewn their names to, and it is pretty adorable, to be honest. Like, this is one of those moments that, as a kid, it really does feel like, oh, really? Oh, like, not specifically this situation, but it feels like this when you are somebody who had plans already for the day, and somebody comes in and decides that they want to do something that feels way less exciting or a little too wholesome, whatever. But as a grown-up, looking at the fact that their Grunkle Stan took them here, that he made hats with their names on them, that he really is asking them to, like, be part of a moment that means something to him. When you get older and you look back on things like this, you're like, oh my God, that's really, like, I wish I had really understood then. Or I wish that I had taken the time, because... And I'm not trying to get too serious about this, but it really is, as somebody who has started to lose family members, it really starts to, like, come home to roost. The fact that you prioritized all of these other things that at the time felt more exciting, but in the end mean nothing. Like, they just, you know, even if I were in this situation, for example, and this was my dad, and I even, like, found a fucking monster and took the photo and made the money. But then my dad passed away the way he has. I would look back on this day and be bummed out that I didn't spend it with him instead of looking for a monster to photograph. Like, this is the sort of thing that they are supposed to, by the end of the episode, sort of get it and see how hurt and lonely Grunkle Stan is, but I truly don't think that you can ever really get it until you have gotten older and or lost family members. Like, that's just, there's no real way to explain, because people think that, well, we weren't close anyway, so it won't matter. Like, you know, it doesn't always matter. Like, it doesn't, not to say that, you know, there aren't people who are like, well, I mean, it's a bummer that he's dead, but it doesn't really affect me. That can happen. But sometimes it's worse if you weren't close with somebody and you kind of feel like there was a missed opportunity there looking back. So anyway, he tells them that they're going to be on the boat for 10 hours and that he brought a joke book. And as they're trying to formulate a way to get out of this, here comes local Kook, who is barefoot and just wearing like bandages around each of his feet. And he has like a cast on one arm, and his beard almost reaches to his feet. He's got only a couple of teeth left. His eyes face in different directions, and he is causing absolute havoc on the shore, yelling at everybody, running through piles of stuff, knocks a sandwich out of a guy's hands. I saw it! Gravity Falls Gobblewonker! Come quick before he scram-doodles away! Ha-ha! Hua! And when Mabel says he's doing a happy jig, he says, no, it's a jig of grave danger. One of the fucking dudes from the Forest Services comes out and starts spraying him with a bottle like a cat that's trying to jump up on the counter, and tells him, this is your last warning, Dad. See, this is what I'm talking about. This kind of joke. Before he scram-doodles away, this is a jig of great danger. What have I told you? This is your last warning, Dad. All these jokes happen within the span of about 8 seconds. Maybe less. It is one after the other. I've got proof this time, by gubbity. Behold! And he points to his boat that has this big hole, or it's basically just broken in half. And he describes it with its wrinkly skin and its long neck. It's shim-shammed over to Scuttlebutt Island. You gotta believe me. He's got a Band-Aid on his beard, I'm just realizing. I don't even know what that's about. And then we get the two cops who show up again in the next episode. One of them is a short, fat black man who wears sunglasses all the time. And then there is the tall, unibrow, like one-toothed yokel. And these two, I like, for a moment... For a moment, I was like, are these two supposed to be based on cops from Twin Peaks or something? Like, because you get that vibe about this place, that there are some Twin Peaks, like, low-key references happening. But I don't think so. I think they're just doing, like, the kind of, archetypes, right? There's the cool cop who's a little bit too lazy, and then there's the cop who's just... like really stupid and doesn't think things through at all. And they are joining in with all of the people on this dock, making fun of this guy who just mumbles under his breath as he runs off in embarrassment, donkey spit, banjo polish. Which I have to say, I want to, somehow pull into my vernacular as swears or expletives of frustration or something. Donkey spit, banjo polish. That is really okay. So, they are getting into, we have Grunkle Stan, donkey spittle. Sorry, guys. I misquoted. Grunkle Stan gets into the boat, and both Dipper and Mabel are still on the dock, realizing this guy said that he saw a monster. This is the exact thing that we are looking for. And I think that we should maybe try and ditch Grunkle to go and catch this thing. So this is when we get this moment of Mabel in her human-sized, what do you call it? Gerbil ball? And telling one of the little hamster ball, telling a little hamster that is also in a hamster ball that maybe it shouldn't have acted so high and mighty. And then they have her, and she's leaning up against a trash can on a corner as these two super hot, cool guys in a convertible look over their sunglasses at her in amazement as she says, "Sorry, boys, you can look, but you can't touch." And I swear to God, guys, this moment is so pure and wonderful and stupid. These two dudes, too, the illustration, one of my favorite parts of this joke is that the illustrative style is completely different than used on any other character in the entire show so far. It's obviously meant to be like, it's a fucking, it looks like something out of a board game from the 80s. Like, does that make sense? I don't know how many of you out there have played those games that were like, where you could like Dream Boy, I think was one of them. And, you could like take cards that had like personality traits and put them with like cards that were what the guy looked like their photo, things like that. And those were actual photos, but there would be like illustrations in games like that. And these two dudes look exactly like that. And I love that this show has chosen to make Mabel boy crazy, because really that is such a rare thing to do with a young girl character. It is just not really like doing it with a boy character is seen as totally reasonable and is so par for the course. But doing it with a girl character and having it be a sincere thing that she isn't constantly like made fun of for, it's not that they don't tease her. Like, of course they do, but it's just so sincere. I just really love it. I was not necessarily boy crazy that young. It didn't take long, and I certainly wasn't as open about it as she is. And I kind of love that she is free in this show in front of two male family members. She'll just talk about this stuff and have no sort of like compunction about it at all. And that makes me love her. So yeah, this like daydream that she has gets her completely on board with what it is that Dipper wants to do. So they decide that they're going to do this monster hunt, and Grunkle Stan gets really irritated. And at this point, because Grunkle Stan's, his little sad little motorboat is called Stan-O-War. At this point, the SS Cool Dude comes up. It's a fishing boat reminiscent of the one in Jaws. And it's Seuss who is on this, and he agrees to help them out with finding this monster. So they have a little moment of Grunkle Stan trying to convince them to stay, explaining all of the things that he could teach them. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the boat like halfway across the lake already. And it really is kind of a sad moment, because we haven't seen him be vulnerable at all. And this, like, you know, little bit of disappointment and feeling abandoned is just sort of heart-wrenching. And they're partway to the island when they realize they don't have sunscreen, and they turn the boat around. Nice little bit of a public service announcement there. And then we see the shadow of the Grobblewonker under the water, which we wind up finding out later is indeed a real thing, but they don't actually run into this thing. So it'll be a whole other situation. They start talking about what roles they're playing here. And Seuss wonders if he's a side character that dies in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and he's really worried about it. And I love that he says it, and then he goes, "Do you guys ever think about stuff like that?" Which, that's just a real conversation starter. Like, that's something that I kind of want to remember, because, like, do you guys ever... Of course we're the main character in our own movie, but if we were, like, in a movie, though, you know... Like, I'm the fat, funny friend. I would definitely die. And I would die in a really, like, embarrassing way, too, probably. But, yeah, this running gag of having a ton of cameras is the best thing in the entire world. Dipper has brought... How many cameras does he say? Here's a camera. No film. You see what I'm doing here? Oh, I dropped the camera. That's why I brought... Here it is. 17 disposable cameras. And he has gotten so many in all of these different parts of, like, he's hidden them in his socks, under his hat and everything. And it turns out to be really lucky, because they immediately are dropping these fucking things over the side. Birds are chucking, like, Mabel just chucks her camera at a bird that tries to swoop down on her. The whole, like, I again, love this joke. So they let's talk about this couple that this guy is trying to propose to this girl. And he's in the middle of this, and poor Grunkle Stan, who is really, like, lonely right now and trying to make friends with random people on the lake, he comes rolling up to them, and he tells them a joke. Guys, want to hear a joke? Here goes. My ex-wife still misses me, but her aim is getting better. But her aim is getting better. He says the punchline twice, right on top of the other, and then, you see, it's funny, because marriage is terrible. Guys. Honestly, I swear to God, like, when we really stop and think about how many jokes, classic jokes, really come from, hey, I hate my wife, it's really upsetting, isn't it? And I love that Grunkle Stan he's being used in the show in a similar way as Chevy Chase's character is used in Community, where he's, like, meant to sort of lampshade what used to be funny and what used to be acceptable, and now we're realizing is totally not okay. And this, like, there are just so many layers to why this joke works, like who he's telling it to when the guy's about to propose, all of it. Owen and I just fell out at this part. Like, this just really might be my favorite part in the entire episode because of how aggressive he's being and the way that the couple just, like, rose away from him without answering. There's just something about the way that this is all set up that I love so much. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but this, what winds up happening, like, okay. They wind up in a fog bank. Mabel and Zeus, I keep wanting to call him Zeus. Mabel and Zeus and, Dipper, and they plow right into the fucking island because they don't see it coming. There's a pretty cool totem pole sitting, like, right outside the island. There's signs that say beware. And they are wandering around in this sort of spooky atmosphere, looking for something, as Mabel and Zeus beatbox. My name is Mabel. It rhymes with table. It also rhymes with label. It also rhymes with schmabel. And he says, dude, we should be writing this down. Again, with total sincerity, which is what I think makes these jokes work, is that there's not really almost ever a sort of mean-spiritedness to any of it. Everybody is fucking for real on this. So they hear a growling, and then they see the silhouette of this, like, Loch Ness Monster style creature that is out in the fog in the water. And they're going to take a photo of it, and then Zeus, like, heads straight for it. We get a cut to one of the weirder jokes. First of all, it looks like a monster, but it's actually a wrecked ship. And there are a bunch of beavers on this wrecked ship. And one of them says, I love cavorting. The other says, that deserves a hug. And the third simply falls off the side of the busted boat. And then we see one of them, like, chewing on a chainsaw that just starts up. And guys, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what is it funny? Yes, but in that, like, bewildering way where you're just like, what is happening? I got nothing. And guy, Y'all, it's a beaver with a chainsaw. I don't know what more to say about that. So, Grunkle Stan is continuing to try and get random kids to, like, be his friend. Meanwhile, their parents are standing right there, and he seems super creepy and aggressive, and they are threatening to call the police, which seems totally reasonable. Our friends on the island are taking many photos of these beavers. It is, I mean, I would totally befriend beavers. There's also, I forgot to mention, a pelican that Mabel, like, makes talk. And that is very amusing as well. And at one point, Dipper is sitting on what he thinks is a rock, and it makes a noise, and then it dips under the water, and he is left there just, like, swimming and totally vulnerable in a way that I felt the show just breezed right past. It was a really scary moment for me. I'm just saying. And as he's standing there asking them why they don't just take photos, this monster comes up out of the water and is staring at them dragon-like with glowing eyes. And Dipper drops his camera like a goddamn fool and takes off running. And so we have a chase sequence. It's very similar to the chase sequence with the gnomes coming after them, except they're on foot rather than on their little go-kart. And he tries to take a picture again, trips, and almost gets caught. And Seuss runs back and grabs him, and they make their way to the boat, which miraculously manages to get off the island no problem. This fucking dragon thing chases them right to the edge of the island, and rather than taking a photo with the million cameras that they've got, Seuss is chucking them at the monster like that's going to accomplish absolutely anything. And they wind up getting into another chase scene on the boat, which I'm here for it, to be honest. I'm hoping that there are more lake creatures like this at some point. Like, I don't mean like this because we find out that this is not a thing, but I mean, I want there to be more underwater sort of adventures, because that feels, for me, a lot scarier than just stuff in the woods. Stuff that's like underwater where you're supposed to be going to have a good time. Don't like it. And this is intercut with poor Grunkle Stan watching this really touching moment between a picture-perfect grandfather and his two grandkids who tell them, "Pop, Pop, I just realized that I love you." And fucking Grunkle Stan is booing from his boat. "What's your problem?" And the kid says, "Maybe he has no one who loves him, Pop, Pop." Y'all, it's too mean. It's too mean. So, this giant creature goes flying by. Grunkle Stan fails to notice the significance of what is happening. And, the beavers are piled up on the boat that looks like a monster that they're heading towards, simply saying, "We're still beavers," as they chew on this ruined boat. Guys, what is with the beavers? What is it? This is the weirdest choice. I feel like this has to be something. Is it a reference? What is it? So eventually, as they like fly around the lake to escape this monster, they hit practically everything and everybody. And they send the lumberjack family into the water. He's in the middle of literally, he's giving a fish a noogie, basically. He's got him in a headlock. And there's a couple of dudes who are transporting glass in the style of like, guys, it's just so good. The only thing that could have made it better is if there were several boats that were like selling fruit and they just like knocked over all of the fruit stands. I can't tell you how much I love that throughout all of this, Seuss is still wrestling with a fucking beaver. What is happening? So they head for this waterfall and they think that they're going to go like into a wall right underneath it and crash. But it turns out that there is a huge cave underneath, and it's got too small an opening for this monster to get in and threaten them. And they're standing there watching it thrash around, and there's one camera left underneath Dipper's hat. So he takes a couple of really good shots of it. And they're having a moment of real, like, oh, we did something. But then a lump of rock falls from the ceiling onto this thing's head, and it fizzes and goes out. Its eyes turn dark, and it turns out that this whole thing is actually like a very elaborate robot. It is actually kind of rad and badass, and this guy should definitely make a bunch of money off of it. But there's a trap door on it that they open, and local Kook is inside, and he's controlling everything. And he says, "Oh, banjo polish." I love it. I love it. I love it. And they ask him why the hell he did this. And he's like, I just wanted attention. First, I just hootenannied up a biomechanical brainwave generator. Then I learned to operate a stick shift with my beard. When you get to be an old fella like me, nobody pays attention to you anymore. My own son hasn't visited me in months, so I figured maybe I'd catch his fancy with a 15-ton aquatic robot. Guys, he then says, in retrospect, it does seem a bit contrived. Y'all, this show is gonna fucking kill me. The show is like, yeah, we know it doesn't make any sense. Shut up. Shh. Stop it. Stop talking about it. So the kids are realizing that they have left Grunkle Stan out there all by himself, that this poor guy is desperate to spend time with his family. And Seuss says, looks like the real lake monster is you two. And he has this whole presentation about all of the different robots that he's made. A homicidal pterodactyltron, or when my pal Ernie didn't come to my retirement party, and I constructed an 80-ton shame bot that exploded the entire downtown area. Somebody who, just kind of overreacts to some social slights. But yeah, he's working on a death ray, and they don't do anything to sort of stop him. It's something. I love it. I want this guy to come back with a death ray in a later episode, please, that they knew about and did nothing to stop. So they go back to Grunkle Stan on the wrecked remains, the tiny, like barely floating remains of Seuss's boat. And they tell their Grunkle that the only dinosaur that they really want to hang out with is him. And he tries to be like, whatever, I didn't even need you. I've been having a really good time. And I even had a run-in with the lake police and have to wear this ankle monitor. So I've just really been living it up since you guys were gone. And they both put on their hats. And that totally softens his heart that he has tried to harden against them. And it turns into Mabel telling him, because he's like, I can thread a hook with my eyes closed. And she says, I bet you can't do it while I sing at the top of my lungs. And I gotta say, that sounds like the worst thing in the entire world. And I am very, very here for it. And we get a series of photos that they took all day at the lake. One of them includes Mabel literally cutting the net that has a fish in it off of somebody else's net so that she can take it, and then them getting chased again by the cops. It's all excellent. And as they're leaving, they hit a bump and they wonder what it was. And then we get a look at the camera falling, another one. I don't know if it's the one that they just took all of the day's photos with, which would be kind of sad. But it gets swallowed by an actual creature. So there is something in this water that they just missed. All right, moving on to the next episode. I'm not going to address the pelican joke at the end of this one. I'm not going to do it. So everybody's just going to have to deal with it. Headhunters. Guys, first of all, I would like to register my personal satisfaction with the fact that I knew that this was John Oliver voicing Sherlock, because Owen argued with me for a minute that it definitely wasn't. And I was like, dude, I fucking know that voice when I hear it. Get the hell out of here. But it is. I'm going to spoil this right out of the gate, where it turns out that all of these other wax figures are alive and cursed. Here for it. I am here. Like, it's not even that I didn't think that this... I mean, the main thing for me is that this show has so far been about, like, the kinds of weird creatures that you would find in Monster Hunter shows, right? Like, gnomes notwithstanding. That is still something that people, like, believe exists and whatever. But now that we've got, like, cursed wax figures that just walk around, this is 100% better show to me, because they're willing to do this kind of weirdo shit. It doesn't have to just be cryptozoology stuff. It is also, well, we're just gonna, I don't know, just curse dolls, I guess. Sure. Yeah, let's do that. And we start off with them watching an episode of something like Sherlock, except that the duck is the detective. Duck detective. And the duck does not speak English. It just speaks duck quack that gets translated. I really hope that this comes back. Guys, help me out. There was some cartoon in which, in that universe, there was another show called Tiny Butler. What is this from? Little Butler. Not Tiny Butler. Little Butler. And the whole, like, theme of it is that Little Butler said, oh, it's from Steven Universe. That's what it is. He says all the time, you people have too much money. And that's like the hook of the show, is this teeny butler that works for this, like, incredibly demanding household. And I cannot tell you. I think that only happened on like 2 episodes, and yet Owen and I reference Tiny Butler all the time. And Little Butler. I'm getting it wrong, but I think we do say Tiny Butler, so my bad. But I want Duck Detective to be a thing now that we reference. Like, I'm hoping that that's reoccurring enough that it becomes, because, like, that moment when he's like, what do you think it is? And the duck turns to the screen and goes, Mama! Like, what? Why? Who cares why? It's perfect. That's all. That's all you need to know. Duck Detective will return after these messages. Mabel, for her part, is 100% on board with this. And when Dipper kind of says that he isn't that impressed, she's like, oh, really? Do you think that you could outsmart him? And he's like, well, I can tell by your breath that you ate an entire tube of toothpaste. And he, like, says it and then sort of stops and he's like, wait, what? And we see her looking away from him with her mouth surrounded by sparkles and, like, this bluish. And she says it was so sparkly. That feels very on brand for Mabel. I love that Mabel is like me and that you just put glitter on something and she's here for it. At this point, Seuss comes in and he tells them that he found a secret room. And it is a series of wax figures. We've got Queen, what's her face? Is the Queen right now Elizabeth? God damn, Victoria. That's the other one that died. What is the Queen's name? Oh my God, I do not know what the Queen's name is. Is it Elizabeth? It's not Elizabeth. But yeah, and we've got Nixon, and we've got Coolio, and Shakespeare. There's a lot of things happening here. And I adore the joke of Dipper looking around and saying how they all look really like lifelike, except this one, and then that turns out to be actual Grunkle Stan. And he tries to reassure them and just be like, oh, it's your favorite Grunkle, Uncle Stan. And that makes them scream and run away. It's a pretty good joke. So we get the opening credits, and he explains that he got all of these. He starts to say at a discount. We find out later that he actually stole them. Behold the Gravity Falls Wax Museum, one of our most popular attractions before I forgot all about it. I got 'em all. Genghis Khan. And he comes across what's obviously Larry King holding a microphone. And he says, some kind of, I don't know, goblin man. Guys, can I tell you something? Owen and I, because he was arguing with me about whether or not that was actually... Oh, sorry, Melanie. I'm just seeing that you've been commenting. Yeah, she's saying what I was about to say. That when we looked up who the voice of Sherlock was, because we were arguing about it, then we found out that it was actually Larry King and actually Coolio doing the voices for the two of their figures. Which I gotta say... knowing that makes it all 100,000 times funnier. Like at the end of the episode, in the after credits, we've got the head of Larry King, which has still survived somehow in the vent system, hopping after a rat, and he's saying, "I'm hopping after a rat who stole my ear." Like, it is actually Larry King somewhere in the world. He was on a mic. And he literally was reading that line. Larry fucking King. That is so fucking funny to me. I can't. I love it so much. If I had the patience and inclination, I would try and make that my ringtone. Because just Larry King just saying, what? I'm here for it. Is that all I'm saying? So, and he's showing them... And my personal favorite, Abraham Lincoln. Oh, nope. It turns out Abraham Lincoln was melted because he was left in front of a window that had the blinds up. And this leads to two things. First of all, it leads, of course, to Mabel, who sculpts a brand new wax figure from all of the wax that used to be Abraham Lincoln. But also, we find out that they can be easily taken down by melting them. Which comes into play later when we get into a giant wax figure fight. I'm just saying. So Mabel carves this amazing wax carving. It would have been really easy to have her do something that was like super strange and creepy and childish looking, that was like well-intentioned but not actually. Nope. They have her do a fucking impeccable copy. And granted, that's sort of important for the actual story, that this thing could be mistaken for Grunkle Stan. But I still kind of love that the show has chosen to make her a little bit like of a genius in this regard. I like it. So, but before she decides to do Grunkle Stan, she's like brainstorming what she wants to do. And she is thinking through all of the options. And she holds up this drawing. She's part fairy princess and part horse fairy princess. And this illustration, y'all, I'm not okay with it. I don't like it at all. It's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. I just don't. No, that's a nightmare. And then he says, how about drawing something from real life? And she says, like a waffle with big arms. Okay, guys, listen. Again, I love callbacks. I am so hoping that a fairy princess that's also part horse fairy princess and a waffle with big arms actually turn up somewhere. I just want that because it just makes no sense at all. And finally, he's like, or you could, carve out somebody in your family. And he clearly kind of means that she should do him. And then Grunkle Stan comes in and asks if anybody has like seen his pants, I think is what he's looking for. And he puts one foot up on this suitcase that's sitting there and gazes out in this like really imposing way, even though, he's only looking for his pants. And she has the big star eyes and realizes exactly what she's meant to do. And then we get a montage of her working on this wax figure that is just amazing. In the end, she steps back from it and says, I think it needs more glitter. And Seuss says agreed and hands her a literal bucket. And they pour glitter all over it. And it is a giant, slightly purple depiction of Grunkle Stan. And he loves it. And what he does is reopens the wax museum. And all of these people are showing up, and they're all like kind of surprised at the fact that so many people have come. We find out later that he falsely bribed them by saying that there would be free pizza, which I got to tell you, that shit works though. I mean, do you guys want to hear something like kind of, in my opinion, sort of messed up? So I don't know how many of you guys had this experience, but I just saw an article recently about how many college students are having trouble feeding themselves because they just have so little money and don't have time to also work a lot of the time that they can't afford groceries. And like what they get for their student meals is not enough for the whole day. And that's assuming that they have a student meal plan. Like not everybody even does that. And I remember that very distinctly when I was in college, that my student meal credits, I tried to maximize as much as I could because buying actual groceries was very difficult. And there was somebody who was teaching a little class about how to get community involvement in projects that you were doing on campus, like how to attract people to your events and stuff. And one of the tactics that they employed was going to a pizza shop and getting an empty pizza box, taping the flyer for your event on the inside of the box, and then leaving the box somewhere on campus on a table with a little like card on top that like one of those like folding sort of table tents that says free pizza. And people would come over all excited because we're starving and be like, ooh, free pizza. And then they would open this pizza box and there would be a fucking flyer for Ultimate Frisbee or some shit inside. I don't know about you guys, but if somebody tricked me like that, that box is going out the fucking window. That box is getting stomped into a garbage can or used for the kindling for the bonfire next week. Like, I remember being like, that would be really smart and it probably would work for a couple people. And then you would just have people who were angry turning up and just being like, you know what? Fuck you. So anyway, this reminded me of that a lot, the lying about there being free pizza. And it turns out that, what's the name of the red-haired girl that's like working for their Grunkle? She is there. Wendy. Thank you, Melanie. She is saying that he bribed her. And it turns out he also bribed Dipper, which I enjoy. And he comes out and he like makes his announcement about everything. And there's like no applause. And it's very, very awkward. At one point he says, ladies, control yourselves, as a joke. But the camera actually turns to these three women who look very angry, very unattractive, and are surrounded by flies. And it is just such a weird, like, it's like the suggestion is that either they stink really bad or they're like basically dead. I don't know what's going on there, but it's uncomfortable. So he makes his announcement and shows off the Grunkle Stan wax figurine, and nobody is very impressed with it. There's like two people that like kind of applaud, and that is all that happens. And then we get a series of questions. So Mabel is the one that's going to be answering them. I made this sculpture with my own two hands. It's covered in my blood, sweat, tears, and other fluids. And everybody understandably just goes, and she just laughs and goes, yeah. What is that, guys? If that isn't the weirdest moment in this entire show. I thought this was a family program. Are we supposed to think that she peed on it? What is that supposed to mean, though? What is that? What does she... What... I don't like it. That's all I'm saying. It freaked me out. So, are the wax figures alive? And follow-up question, can I survive the Waxman uprising? From local Kook, who turns out to be right on the money. Because what happens is that Grunkle Stan, he decides that he is going to hang out with this figurine like it's an actual person. And everybody is so mad as they're leaving and realizing that they are not getting their free pizza that there's like a little riot, basically. And they have to decide, once Grunkle Stan walks away and comes back and the head is gone, they have to figure out which of the angry people was angry enough to do something like this. And the thing that they come up with is that it has to be the, what do you call it? Lumberjack man. Because he has an axe, and he was the most angry. But when they actually go to, like, question him at this really scary bar, he has a good alibi. He says, because it's Dipper questioning him, where were you? And he says, I was punching the clock. And Dipper says, oh, so you were at work? And he's like, no, I was punching that clock. And there's a clock that he punched and broke at the exact time of the supposed murder. So he's taken off the list. Then there's this other dude who was like reporting for his little like rag newspaper that they suspect. And it turns out that he also has an alibi where he was like on film kissing the cardboard cutout of an actual news reporter woman who showed him up at that event earlier in the same day. Super, super creepy. And I do not want to sidestep the amazing bouncer when they go and try and find the lumberjack guy with the words head and chin tattooed on his head and chin. And when the camera is behind him, his neck has the tattoo neck on the back of it. Why is that funny? I don't know why. I don't get it. But it's so fucking hysterical. I was dying laughing. And the fact that neck pops up a second later, like you're already laughing at the first two. And then when they do that on top of it, it just like it sent me right over. So in the end, what winds up happening is that they find out that, because, you know, the police are really irritated that they have even suggested they can crack this case before the two kids could crack this case before the two of them. They are watching and mocking them all the time. Except for that moment when they are at the memorial service for Wax Stan, whose shoe has a hole in it. And Mabel says, well, they all have that. That's where their shoe attaches to all of the stands. And this is when Dipper realizes, oh my God, the person whose footprints were in the room, they had a hole in their shoe and they didn't have any fingerprints. And they turn around and all of these wax figures are moving around. And it turns out that they are cursed, but they kind of like it. They like being cursed. Like, they are usually on display. So they just go around poking and prodding people and fucking messing with them. And they have had an amazing time doing that. But then Grunkle Stan put them in a fucking warehouse, or not warehouse, in a room that was locked away from everything. And they aren't able to go and roam around anymore. I love the clap. Go ahead, clap sarcastically. Now slow down. Nice and condescending. It's good. So they want to take out their revenge on Grunkle Stan because he didn't allow them free reign. The guy who tried to sell them to him, first of all, says they come at a terrible price. And he says, $20. I'll just take them when you're not looking. And the guy says, what? And he said, I said I was going to rob you. And that's the fucking flashback moment. Guys, Grunkle Stan, low-key, MVP. When your uncle was asleep, we would rule the night. And we get to see all of these like things that they were doing, going around the house, going through the fridge, like messing with one another. Larry King poking at Coolio's braids. There's Edgar Allan Poe is like taking his photo while he's asleep. But he turns out to be like making no money on this thing. So that's why he locks them away and gradually like forgets that room is even there. And they want to kill him. They come out once the door is finally opened to kill him. And it turns out they got the wax figure instead because he was in the bathroom and they made a mistake. Guys, this is the weirdest thing and I love it. I love it so much. So, in the end, got to jump ahead a little bit here because I'm running out of time. The kids, as they fight with these wax figures, figure out, get it, that they can only be defeated by melting. So they use candles, long taper candles, as weapons, throw them in the fireplace. Even when their arms are chopped off, the arm like continues to choke Mabel at one point, and she has to smash it in a door. And eventually the only one that is left, so they think at least, until we see Larry King's head bouncing around, is Sherlock. And Dipper gets him to follow him outside and up onto the roof. And so Sherlock is in the middle of like fucking monologuing when the sun comes up and it melts him into a puddle and he just like pours off the edge of the roof into a big puddle. And I gotta say that fighting wax figures and all of them having their little voices and their little tics, like Groucho Marx even, and it is just all so much fun. Even Shakespeare, she like Mabel asks him if he knows any limericks, and he like tries to come up with one that's like really lame, and she just tosses him in the fire because it's no good. This is a pretty good ending. And the cops come up and are like, oh, did you solve the case? And they're like, yeah, we did. And they have a spit take moment that goes on for quite a while and then drive away. And my favorite joke, the kids are laughing about the fact that the cops were wrong. Grunkle Stan is also laughing. And then Grunkle Stan says they got scalded. And you hear the fucking car crash in the background. I love morbid jokes like that sometimes. If there's too many of them, it can feel a little bit like, okay, we get it. You're really edgy. But when it's only here and there, it feels really genuinely extra funny. So, guys, yeah, this show, I'm loving it. Thank you very much, Melanie, for commissioning this. This is super fun. And I'm way over time here. My apologies. But I can't wait to watch the next two. I will let you guys know if I'm ever doing a single episode for a Spoil Me, but on the air table, the next episode of coverage is going to be for the next 2 episodes of the show. So if you're watching along or whatever, I don't know who would be doing that, but some people do. That's what's going to be covered the next time. So I'm excited. All right, guys, thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Thank you, Melanie, for hanging out, and Erica as well. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.